What's on your playlist right now?
I'm in my class.
Go to guilty pleasure food.
Ice cream.
Ice cream. Mark Winey has been the Dean of the College of Biological Sciences since 2016. He's guided the college through a transformative decade and set the stage for even more impact. I understand that when he's not leading one of the nation's top biological science programs, he's often out on the trails hiking and biking. I hope he'll have a wildlife story or two to share with us today. Welcome to Face, Mark. Thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We're going to talk today about the importance of federally funded research, among other things. I'm looking forward to hearing more about your adventures, hiking and biking, and the outdoors, as well as your career in science. So let's start with your own path to research. Tell us about what sparked your interest and your curiosity, and tell us about any mentors who invested in you along the way.
Thank you for that question. So many people, so many mentors, starting with an inspirational high school biology teacher. But the initial interest in genetics came from the fact that we have an inherited metabolic disease in the family. My youngest sister has something called galactosemia. She's unable to process milk sugar appropriately, so she's on a dairy-restricted diet. If she has a lot of milk or milk products, she will accumulate a toxic intermediate. So this was a rather serious disease for kids until this diagnosis became available. It's a very simple, as far as the genetics goes, disease. Both parents, mom and dad, carry a recessive disease-causing allele, so they have a 1 in 4 chance of any of the kids having the disease, and Christine ended up having the disease. And that was something I could understand as a kid, and then started having questions, well, how does anybody know that? How do they understand how the genetics works? How do they understand the biochemistry of the disease? And it's just become a career.
That must have been really incredibly motivating for you to have that personal experience and try to translate it into something that you can do to solve the problem.
Yes,
yeah.
Very motivating. My PhD thesis is dedicated to Christine for the inspiration to become a geneticist and a cell biologist. And then the family has a strong education vibe or tradition, so the education side kind of came naturally as well, and trying to share that enthusiasm with students.
That's fantastic. Now, back to the mentors, as you mentioned, they've had incredible impact on your own career. I am a big believer in mentoring. I wonder, do our students at UC Davis and CBS, do they have that same opportunity for mentoring? And tell us about that.
Oh, well, thanks you for that question, because we really do work hard to ensure that our students do have the opportunity to get to know faculty well through their classroom experience, but more importantly through experiential learning, getting to work in a laboratory, do a clinical shadowing, whatever the students want to get engaged in that they think would be important for their career and personal development. And the mentoring experience there to show them that they can be a scientist, they can be a healthcare professional, and help them envision themselves in that role and understand what that work is like is very important, and one of the great reasons to come to a research active university like this.
That's right. That's why we all do this.
Yeah.
Now, you've had a great career, Mark, as both a researcher and as a campus leader. Can you think of a discovery that you're most proud of in your career?
Yes. So this was actually published 35 years ago and is still an area of work. We're going to have to do a little biology for a moment. Many of our cells grow. They have to grow and divide into two. We do about 1 million cell divisions a minute just to keep our white blood cell count up. And a really important point in cell division is when one chromosome is replicated into two and they divide into the daughter cells. That's called mitosis. We discovered a key regulator of that event and reported it 35 years ago, and it is still studied to this day. We found it in the very simple baker's yeast, but there's a human version of it. It's misregulated in tumor cells, where mitosis is often misregulated in cancer cells, and it's even been a target for some therapeutic development as well for tumors. So that's been an ongoing area of work that has grown into many, many labs working on it around the world that grew out of a discovery we made a long time ago.
That's awesome. When you first made the discovery, did you realize then what impact it would have, or was it something that didn't seem as exciting at the time and just grew?
Me personally, I think many of my colleagues have the aspiration that it would be a big finding, important finding. But at the moment, it was just so interesting what we learned about it. It was really intriguing and engaging just to study it without thinking about the larger impact that came in the years to follow.
Yeah. Now, in the college, you and your colleagues, you study everything from molecules to ecosystems. Mm-hmm. How do you create the environment that allows curiosity-driven, multidisciplinary research to thrive?
Part of it's the fact that we're a college of biological science. So we're all biologists across the scale that you mentioned, approaching biological questions in different ways, but we all can appreciate each other's enthusiasm and interest. And biological systems are just so complicated and so amazing in how they've come to be engineered and what they can achieve in growing and surviving harsh climates and all sorts of questions that just the questions that people ask always seem to get a positive response. There's just a really strong shared ethos interest in understanding how biological systems work and making sure that is held up and recognized and encouraged. Yeah.
You do a great job of that. I think it's true that some of the most important discoveries start as simple questions that researchers ask. Outside of your own work, can you share something that CBS has done or one of your colleagues has done that has been just a tremendously impactful piece of work?
Well, a piece that's becoming very impactful right now has to do with self-cloning or clonal hybrid plants. So from a question in Professor Sundaresan, known generally as Sundar's lab, about just how plant cells make gametes and then make seeds and how that works and the genes involved, came to realize, working with some colleagues at other institutions, that they could modify that program so that hybrids, which are expensive for farmers to get the seeds because they have to buy new seeds each year from the company that makes the hybrid plant, can take a hybrid plant and make it clonal, that'll grow over and over again. And it's on its way to revolutionizing agriculture, particularly in places with scarce resources. He did that work originally in rice. He's been recognized with many international awards for that, and now just got a very large grant to work on other crop species, particularly ones that are important to various communities in India.
That's fantastic, and that's really indicative of the kind of research impact that we want to have at UC Davis. So kudos to the college and to Sundar. Now, it also brings up the question about funding such research.
Right.
Much of the research we do is funded federally.
Yes.
And we're now going through sort of an unstable period in federal funding.
Yes.
What would you say would happen if federal funding of basic research were to diminish or to be lost?
So yes, I should have mentioned Sundar's work was funded by the National Science Foundation and by USDA. And the loss of that funding will have at least two major impacts or reduced funding. One is just the work that's getting done. Much of the work takes years to accomplish, requires ongoing investment and support, and would just slow down the entire discovery pipeline of new information and new technologies that can be applied in various ways in real-world applications. Also, being a research university, the work that's I quoted about Sundar's was done by a postdoctoral fellow, or some of it. So that's a person in training to become a professor later. Our whole training pipeline for undergraduates, graduate students, and postdoctoral fellows would be severely compromised. So we would not only lose scientific knowledge, we would lose part of the scientific workforce.
I'm glad you made that point, because that's the point I've been making to people. I think we automatically go to the discoveries won't be made, which is really important, and that's a fact. But the next generation of scientists, we may be losing because of this inattention or this this improper lens that we're focusing on in research. So we talked a little bit about basic research. I want the audience to understand how basic research leads to discovery, economic development, all those type things. Can you share any thoughts there?
So sometimes it's talked about the tension between basic research and applied research. And in a way, that's two versions of just different questions asked about the same problem. So thinking of the work of Keith Barr in the college, he works on muscles and ligaments and tendons and has basic science questions about how those tissues work. What growth factors are they responsive to? How do they respond to nutrition? The applied question from Keith's lab is, how do we help people who've had a tendon or ligament injury? These can be very difficult to recover from because the tissues are slow growing. And the two have met there, and Keith's work has informed new approaches to physical therapy, nutritional supplements, and ways to treat those types of injuries, and to manage them as people age, because I don't know about you, but maybe a little bit of feeling our age as we try to stay active. So there's a place where basic science questions are addressing the same underlying biological principles as the applied questions, and people are able to make the connection.
Yeah, on the age question, post 60, something hurts every day. But you really made that connection between basic and applied research very well. What would you say to a person, say a skeptic, who said public funding should not be applied to research that does not have immediate impact?
We have no idea what the impact will be of the research that's being done. Also, I think that a little more practical, that's very esoteric and people might not accept that answer. The other practical answer is the people I work with generally can draw a line for people from the large societal question that's tied to their research. Keith is interested in the basic physiology of muscles, tendons, and ligaments. But he can tell you about injury and aging as the application. People working in ecosystems, there are so many questions there about the response to climate change, both for ecosystems and for agriculture. So there are basic questions. How do plants respond to a drying climate? That's a basic science question. What does the plant do during drought? What we learn there and how we can help plants survive drought will be the applied piece of that. And most scientists can make that connection in their work. They are not working in a complete vacuum. They really, at least in the life sciences, can make the connection. We need to understand basically how the organisms work before we can start to understand what's going wrong in a diseased state or under stress.
That's 100% correct. I often tell people that every impactful applied discovery that you can point to, I can trace back to some basic research question that was asked that led to it. So we have to keep making that connection. Now, something we do on Face to Face is a feature we call Hot Seat, and you're on the hot seat.
Okay.
But it's not that bad. All we do is ask some really rapid fire questions, and I'm looking for a one word, one sentence type of answer. So are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Back to hiking. What's your most unforgettable wildlife encounter on the trail?
There's been a lot of great ones. A recent one from last September was we got to see a pine marten in the Grand Tetons. They're very elusive creatures.
Okay. What do they look like?
They're a large weasel,
okay.
dark-colored and much larger than a weasel, more like a ferret size.
All right, okay. What's the most awe-inspiring place you've ever hiked?
Tough question. We've hiked many places, but I still go back to the Wind River Range in Wyoming. It's outstanding.
Okay. What's the weekly mileage, biking and hiking combined?
It's mostly biking since there's not close-in hiking here to Davis and Woodland where I live. It's probably about 75 miles. It's not a whole lot.
Well, that's impressive.
Okay.
Okay. If you could witness one scientific breakthrough anywhere in history firsthand, which one would it be?
Back to the basic genetics that got me interested in this. I'd like to be in Mendel's pea garden with him in the Czech Republic. I don't know if there was a particular aha moment, but Mendel and his peas. But I know these are to be short answers, but my wife and I also recently booked a trip to the Galapagos, so we'll get to see where Darwin worked, so that's great too.
We're going there as well this summer, so I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. Typical geneticist answers, though.
Okay.
Most underrated spot on our UC Davis campus?
There's a garden and sculpture area right by the Scrubs Cafe. that I like very much.
Okay.
And I like to go over there and maybe get something to eat or drink at Scrubs and sit out there. It's very nice.
I'll have to check that out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I ask this question of every guest. What song or artist is on your playlist on repeat right now?
Oh, an old 90s band that is no longer, I think, called the Subdudes.
Okay.
I like them very much. They had a Colorado and New Orleans roots.
Wow, not familiar with them. Interesting. Now, your turn. Ask me anything.
So, you're very kind in your introduction. Talk about the transformative time that we've been here together for and the challenges. So what are some moments when you've like, this is why I'm here. This has made this job worthwhile?
I think, in any leadership role in academia, I think when we decide to take these jobs, it's because we transition from being an individual contributor excited about our own work to one that gets excited about other people's work. So for me at UC Davis, whenever I see a sort of mind-blowing discovery or a great award that a person, a student or a faculty member gets, I get a real sense of pride. It really makes me happy. So I don't want to start listing them because there's too many.
Yeah.
But that's really why I'm in this job and what I enjoy the most.
Oh, well, great.
Mm-hmm.
And you certainly do have lots to be proud of. I mean, the faculty we work with is spectacular.
World class, as we both know. Yeah.
But there still might be occasional professional peeve of some sort.
My professional peeve is I'm not a complainer. And I didn't realize how many people were complainers until I got into leadership. And so my peeve is people that complain, particularly when the complaint is something they can address themselves.
Right.
But they tend to want to have somebody else address it for them.
Well, there's a good bit of professional advice for all our mentees, our students. Help yourself when you can. I was curious if I know the title in Star Trek's science officer is not common throughout the series, but if you had a favorite science officer, since we're talking science today.
Well, actually, Spock is my favorite fictional character of all time.
Okay, all right, there we go.
So it has to be Spock.
Okay, well, thank you.
So that one was easy.
Okay.
Well, Mark, thanks for being with us on Face to Face. I really enjoyed the conversation and look forward to what's next for you and seeing you around campus. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been wonderful. Really appreciate it.
Great. And thanks, everyone, for watching. You can learn more about our UC Davis researchers and their work at ucdavis.edu/labs to lives. We'll see you next time on Face to Face. Go Ags.